Penn State fans, it's Blue White Breakdown time, the late May edition. We're running out of May, Johnny. You and I are recording right now after the holiday. It's actually Tuesday, May 27th. I think we'll have another Blue White Breakdown podcast later this week. And then next thing you know, we're going to be podcasting in June, which is crazy, but also really nice because it means we're getting closer to Penn State season. We have some interesting things to talk about, Johnny McGonigal. On this one, we just had a checklist about some of the things we wanted to go over. And Johnny, I forgot to tee you up on something. Unless you already talked about it, did you and Max cover the new seating for the? You did not. So
no, because that came out. I believe that came out after we recorded.
Right. Well, I can't believe I forgot to, because I mean, you're the guy. You are the guy that follows it so closely. You almost nailed your prediction that it would be Ohio State and Penn State in last year's national championship game. You had the winner, the 8th seed, but does it surprise you at all that the two biggest conferences are just kind of doing what they want, and it's just going to be, It was nice that Arizona State and Boise State got some nice seeds last year, but we're not doing that anymore. We're just gonna, essentially, Johnny, they're just gonna have the committee's gonna rank the teams, and that's gonna be the seeding. Isn't that pretty much right?
Yeah, the CFP is moving to a straight seeding model, and that's for the 2025 season.
Oh my
God! And there's going to be major changes coming. At least if you follow reporting from Ross Dellinger and some of the national reporters who have been covering this, they're expecting big changes for the 2026 season and beyond. You're looking at probably 16-team playoff and possible automatic qualifiers for conferences, more for the Big Ten and SEC than others. So major changes coming beyond this season. But for this season, it's going to be 1 through 12.
Yeah.
So the 5 highest ranked conference champions will still get into the field. Yeah. So it's not like Boise or whoever, that team, maybe it's JMU, maybe it's another team this year. It's not like they're going to be left out, but they're not going to, the 4 highest ranked conference champions are not going to be your 1 through 4 seeds necessarily. Yeah. Like last year, Penn State would have been a top 4 seed, in the CFP, and they weren't because they didn't win their conference. That will not be the case in 2025. The rankings are just going to be the rankings 1 through 12, in terms of how they seed them, 1 through 12, in terms of that first round bye and everything that goes along with that. I think I'm fine with it ultimately.
Yeah. That's my question for you is I think for 2025 it makes a lot. Looking back on how it played out last year and best intentions. For the competitive balance and all that stuff, I think that this is a better version of what it should look like in terms of seeding. But I think it's just clearly they're like, you know what, Boise, you had a good year, but you should have never been seeded where you were. Not that it wasn't a quality win for Penn State in that game, but they're like, yeah, we can't. We're not doing that anymore, man. We're not.
No. And look, Penn State ended up making out all right with their seeding, playing SMU at home, getting a home playoff game.
Sure.
I'm sure Pat Kraft and the athletic department loved that. Love to be able to host a playoff game at Beaver Stadium and everything that comes along with that. They drew Boise State, which again was a good win. They're a good team with a hell of a player, Genti. But there were possibilities of this going sideways, of like Penn State making the Big Ten title game, losing a close one to Oregon, then kind of getting screwed. Like I said, they would have been a top 4 seed, based on the rankings, if not for the way it was set up last year. So I think it's fair, and it's not like Boise isn't ever going to be in again. It's just with the way this is set up now, it's just that they wouldn't get a first round bye, which totally fine with, and obviously the Big Ten, SEC, they're getting their way a little bit here. They're going to be getting their way probably when this thing is reformatted for 2026 and beyond that. But that's kind of just how college football is right now. It's a state of things.
Yeah. All right. I was like, I can't believe I didn't bring this up with Johnny. Like when we just met like 10 minutes ago, we're talking about, hey man, what are we going to talk about? It's late May. And I was like, oh man, and it popped into this gigantic skull right after I hit the record button. I was like, Johnny, I think we might have to bump this up a little bit. But we're going to talk a little bit about a video game announcement involving EA Sports. I wanted to talk next a little bit, just a little bit of recruiting. I know that you've been doing a little bit of that. Penn State's 2026 class is looking pretty nice in terms of quantity and quality. Still a long way to go, but I believe they have 17 kids in the class. I know you just wrote something recently. I don't know if you wanted to touch upon that about maybe, even though it's a pretty large class already, do you, not glaring needs, but do you see some definite needs maybe for Penn State and James Franklin and his assistants maybe moving forward in this class between now and signing day?
Yeah, let's touch on that, and then we'll get to the video game stuff at the end, because that's
We
a
will.
lot of fun. That's
We
a lot
will.
of fun. Not that Penn State recruiting isn't fun to talk about right now,
No.
because they are on a run. Like you mentioned, Bob, 17 commits in the 2026 recruiting class, and that's after Daniel Jennings reclassified for the 2025 class and signing with Penn State early. So yeah, like you mentioned, quantity, quality. They're ranked number 4 nationally by 24/7 Sports. Within the top 10 or some other, rankings elsewhere in different recruiting outlets and networks. But they're doing a good job. James Franklin and his staff are doing a really good job right now. But there are some needs in this class still, and there's going to be needs for everyone. Across the country. Ohio State doesn't have a quarterback committed yet, so Penn State's not alone there, but. They've laid a really good foundation in that they have 2 quarterbacks, 2 linebackers, a running back, 3 wide receivers. But you look at the defensive and offensive lines, and there's some definite work to do there. And that's what's going to be a major focus for Penn State staff over the next few weekends. This weekend, next weekend, the weekend after that, when they have official visits, big time recruits coming to Happy Valley, and they're trying to sell them on committing to Penn State. They've got 2 defensive linemen committed at this point, and they're both projected, as interior guys.
Yeah.
You've got on the offensive line, Kevin Brown, really good player, arguably the top player in Pennsylvania, from Harrisburg.
Yep.
And you've also got a 3-star tackle in Roseby Lubintis. I hope I'm saying his last name correctly. But you've got 2 and 2 on either sides of the line, and I think they would like to be at 5 or 6 on both sides of the line, especially without a true edge rusher committed in the class. That will change. Like, all this stuff will change. There's a lot of names. I outlined quite a few of them in the story that I posted. I think it went up online this morning.
Nice.
On PennLive. And so if you haven't checked that out already, check that out. So that will change. They're going to be getting some big commits in, but I mean, they've got 5 stars and high 4 stars coming in over the next few weekends that we'll definitely need to stay up on and monitor. But yeah, Penn State, the biggest need for me is on the offensive and defensive line as they look to wrap up this 2026 class.
Yeah, and I just think that with their offensive, I just love the fact that we're talking about the offensive line in a positive light, because there was a long stretch where it was like, oh boy, they only had just a decent offensive line, and that's no longer the case. They have more than a decent offensive line this year. There's a lot of veterans on the offensive line. There's some intriguing young players. There's some intriguing freshman offensive linemen in the 2025 class that I think very soon, not this year, but very soon, they'll be key pieces for that offensive line. It's just great that they finally, between James and Phil Troutwine and those guys, kind of gotten their ducks in a row, because it was really just a glaring, weak spot. So if you're saying they need more offensive linemen, I believe you, but I trust them now, Johnny, to identify and develop them, which is something I did not trust them to do about 5 or 6 years ago. So we'll see how that definitely shakes out. Speaking of offensive linemen, last week you and I talked about some of your positional predictions for this Penn State team. Pretty bold. I think I would say most of them are, dare I say, they are legit bold or borderline bold. So I love that. But I wanted to circle back to this 2024 class. We'll talk about one of your latest ones, and it involves Cooper Cousins, who I don't know that there haven't been very many true freshman. He's a sophomore now. True freshman offensive linemen that have had the attitude, the body, and just the desire to play right away, which is not easy to do at interior offensive line. But I think if they needed him to last year, and he did play, right? That he didn't redshirt. If they needed him to, he could have stepped in, and it would not. I mean, by the end of the year, he would have been a hellion. So you had a very intriguing prediction about him, so I'll let you get into that.
Yeah, I think Cooper Cousins is going to be an all Big Ten player this upcoming season. And that's not like, it feels like half of the starters across the big teams in college football get honorable mention just as like, hey, congrats for starting at Penn State or Ohio State or, whatever. I'm talking like, second, maybe it's third team, but like second or third team. I think first team would be, a high bar to get because you still, he's probably going to be starting opposite guard at, with Vengai, Ioane, and then also Manuel Pregnon, who was a second team All Big Ten pick at USC, last year transfers to Oregon. So he's a really good player as well. But I could see Cooper Cousins being a second or third team All Big Ten player this upcoming fall for the reasons that you mentioned, Bob. The playing experience that he had as a true freshman, all 16 games appearing in last year.
Yeah.
But then also, like, we've seen him, in practice. We've talked to him. He doesn't carry himself like a second-year player. He didn't carry himself like a freshman when he enrolled last January, judging from everything that we've heard from teammates and coaches. Even Nick Dawkins this past spring, I think, telling you, Bob, when you wrote about Nick, saying that, Cooper is seizing every opportunity that he has. And the opportunity is pretty big to start on this Penn State offensive line that has 4 or 5 starters returning. The only departure is Sal Wormley in terms of graduation. Then you have JB Nelson, who was set to battle Cooper Cousins for that starting guard job, and he leaves via the transfer portal. Maybe saw the writing on the wall a little bit that this Cooper Cousins kid is really, really good. And so I think everything we've heard, everything we've seen to this point leads me to believe not only will he start on this offensive line and be a part of a group that's going to be blocking for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and opening holes for that running game and protecting Drew Aller. And that's a team that's going to be top 5, maybe, pushing number 1 nationally. So the attention comes with that, right? I think everything can work in Cooper Cousins' favor to the point where he's going to be a name that not just Penn State fans will know this time next year. He'll be considered one of the best offensive linemen in the Big Ten.
Yeah, moving right along here on the Blue White Breakdown, Johnny McGonigal, Bob Flounders. So that 2024 class, I just wanted to do a little experiment with you. I just think I was looking at it, a couple of the names. I think there are several players in this class that will play very significant roles on this team, whether it be at the very start of the season or the middle of the season, or whether there's an injury and somebody's ready to step in. But it's a pretty solid group. You mentioned Cooper Cousins, Luke Reynolds, Max Granville, even somebody like Xavier Gilliam, right? Anthony Specca, John Lane, the safety. I hope I pronounced his first name right. I always get it wrong. If you're listening, I think I got it right, but I'm not positive. And even Johnny, even a guy like Grunk. If he's playing significant snaps for the Penn State season, it means something probably happened to Drew, and I don't think Penn State fans really want to talk about that. But he's a talented kid, and I think Penn State fans are going to be seeing eventually at some point. But I just think in terms of talent, he probably belongs maybe in that conversation. Of those guys I mentioned, or if I missed somebody, who is your pick by the season's end? Do you think will be the guy that it could be a close race, but you can make some compelling cases for a bunch of these guys. Who do you think might be the most valuable, indispensable second-year player by the end of the year?
I already outlined why I think Cooper Cousins is going to have a big year, but on the opposite side of the ball, in the trench off the edge, like Max Granville, I think is due to break out in a big way. Not due because he's a second-year player, but he's going to break out. You talk about the opportunity that's there. Abdul Carter, Amin Vanover, Smith Vilbert, no longer there off the edge. Opposite tonight, Dennis Sutton, someone has to start, and it might be Zariah Fisher, and then Max Granville might be that that third starter that James Franklin always talks about. But even in that role, I think he's going to get a lot of run, and I think he's going to have a lot of opportunity to get after the quarterback in Jim Knowles' defense. And so I think Max Granville, what he showed after reclassifying and coming in early, just a couple days, weeks before the season last year, and then having a role and being the number 2 behind Abdul Carter in the CFP, for him to make that jump and make that growth and the development, from the time he stepped on campus to then in such a short time, to have a full off season and have a runway to a lot of playing time and a lot of opportunity. I think he's going to be one that we're talking about at the end of the season. I also like Dejon Lane as a shout because I think he's kind of the perfect mold of player that Jim Knowles wants to use in a safety hybrid DB role.
Size,
the size, the speed, he hits. I think Dejon Lane is in for a big year as well.
Yeah, I was looking at him. So I just think even a guy like Specca, I know what they're trying to do, and if he does play, I mean, with what Knowles wants to do, they have, I think with the addition of Campbell from North Carolina, they have 3 linebackers that are, it's going to be a lot of 2 linebacker sets. So I think they feel pretty good at the top, and I think something would have to happen for Specca to really have a huge role. But again, that could happen. I was intrigued by Gilliam, but when I look at this list, and I do think there's going to be some guys that can really help this team. I'm going to go with Luke. I think Luke Reynolds. I wish we could have got to see a little bit more of him in spring. Not that they would have overworked him, but he was dealing with, I think, a nagging injury that was very minor. But when you saw him early in spring running around at 252 pounds, remade his body. I think he's gained close to 25 or 30 pounds since he got here. And I think a big athlete who can block, who I think in the red zone, I just think he's going to be a tough matchup, much like Tyler was. And he might be more advanced athletically at this point in his career than Tyler was. 2 kids that are both high school quarterbacks at the start. This kid was a 5-star in a lot of in the minds of a lot of guys. And I just think the opportunity is there. I don't know how teams are going to try and guard him because they're going to have to deal with Penn State's running game. They're going to have to deal with some speed on the outside and some proven receivers. And also Khalil Dinkins is going to be on the field a lot. But I think it's going to be real hard to match up with Luke in the open field.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Reynolds, he's a beast. And without Tyler Warren and that production there, I think they like Khalil Dinkins, and his time is finally now to start. And as a veteran, and you got Rapp in the mix there at tight end as well. Yeah. But I do think Luke Reynolds is poised for a breakout year. I think this class, I think if you look at it overall, this 2024 class, even if it's not this year, it could be next year. Because I mean, I look at the tackles like Garrett Sexton, Egan Boyer, like Rucci and Donk, and you look at Drew Shelton, like you look across the board in this class, even at running back, Singleton and Catron will be gone. Quentin Martin, Corey Smith could be ready to step up and be that next running back tandem for Penn State potentially. So I think there's a good group of guys who will be contributors this year. But you look at the class overall, and I think I'm not going to say it's going to be 2022 foundational class, like Singleton, Catron, Abdul, Guru Aller, like that might be much. But we could be looking back at this 2024 class a few years from now and saying that, hey, this group led them to the 2027, CFP, whatever the heck it looks like by then. They've got some really talented guys in this group, but certainly Luke, Cooper, Dejon, Max, like those guys are poised to have big years this year.
Yeah. I look forward to watching them play and grow. And I do think that I don't know. I think they get some credit, but I don't know that Penn State staff gets enough credit for their they're great at recruiting, but the improvement you see from these guys early in their careers, I think James and his staff need to be commended. It's a hell of a coaching staff when you look at the position coaches and the coordinators. And if you're talented, they're either going to develop you quickly, or if they have to move you to another position, whenever they move you, it's usually to the right spot. So I do think, yeah, I bet you the names I mentioned, I think 7 or 8 names. I bet you 4 of them have just really, really integral roles in where Penn State wants to go. Johnny, let's wrap it up. The blue white
Bob,
red. Yeah,
really quick.
go.
Two other names I wanted to throw out there from that
Good.
class: Kenny Wosley
Yep.
and Tyseer Denmark. Two
Yeah,
Asian.
I knew it. I should have mentioned Tyseer. You're right. Tyseer,
Tyseer,
sorry about that. Sorry.
it's one of those where you have Traber Pena, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross, the 3 transfer wide receivers who will probably be your top 3 guys. But if you're looking beyond that, Tyseer Denmark could
Yeah.
absolutely carve out a role in this offense. And then Kenny Wosley, I think, is one who's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and it's a crowded DB room, but we know how much Jim Knowles likes to use multiple DBs, and I could see him having, having some kind of a, whether it's a rotational role or whatever in the secondary.
Yeah, those 2 you mentioned, 2 Imhotep guys, and you wonder why. One of the guys we didn't get a chance to talk about is because he's no longer at Penn State, is John Mitchell, who I think was a really highly recruited, highly valued corner prospect. But between what Elliott Washington did this offseason and what Wosley and some other guys have done, Audavian Collins have done, and you mentioned JB Nelson. Sometimes you just take a look around and you're like, well, if I want to play here, who am I better than, and who's better than me, and maybe it's time for me to get out of here. So I'm not saying John Mitchell's not a good player, but there's a reason why I think we're talking about these guys, and he might be on another team.
Definitely. You want to wrap it up with the EA?
Let's do the EA. Let's do the EA Sports video thing. I know you're a pretty big video game guy. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn there, but I think the national cover guys. No surprise that Jeremiah Smith is one, and I think is the Alabama receiver Williams is the other one. And Penn State got some regional love, and it was James and Nick Singleton, correct?
Yeah. So the standard cover is Ryan Williams from Alabama, Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State, and then the deluxe edition, which basically is when you go and buy the game, you can spend a little bit more to get the bigger cover with everyone. And it also has I think it'll have a few more perks in terms of gameplay, ultimate. I don't know what those perks will be, but you can spend a little bit more money to get the deluxe edition and the bigger cover. And that cover includes James Franklin and Nick Singleton. It also includes, Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, former players, Tim Tebow, Reggie Bush, Denard Robinson, players across college football, Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, et cetera, et cetera. Even Bryce Underwood, the 5-star true freshman quarterback from Michigan, is on that deluxe cover. So a lot of names. It's pretty much a who's who of college football, and Penn State is represented there with Nick Singleton front and center, by the way. Well, not center, on the right side. Yep. But it kind of goes all the way back, and he's right up there with Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith, and Reggie Bush. So pretty good placement for Nick Singleton and James Franklin on the cover there too.
All right, Johnny, I'm putting you on the spot, and then I'm putting myself on the spot. It's a national cover, and the rules are you can put one Penn State player from this team as the cover guy. Singleton obviously would be a great choice. 2,000-yard seasons. He could be Penn State's all-time leading rusher with a bit of good luck on the health front at the end of the season. Evan Royster's rushing total is in jeopardy. Kaytron Allen could also be the all-time leading rusher. But my question for you is, who's the Penn State guy you think should be on the cover?
I think it is Nick. I think it's earned, and it's one of those where it would have been cool to see both him and Kaytron on the cover together, standing next to each other, because both of them have given so much to the program already and have done incredible things. Drew, I would understand if you think Drew Aller should be on the cover, but we know that Drew is a phenomenal quarterback. I think a really, really good quarterback. But we also know that he has some more, developing to do. And he has some big games to win. The games against Ohio State, et cetera, et cetera. But Nick has been, on the national stage for this team since he was a freshman. The Rose Bowl run, everything from that freshman season on. He's been such an integral part of this program, and I think he's the right guy to be on there.
All right. So you're doing it for not only his you pick him and you make a good case. It's not only for what he's capable of doing this season and who even the postseason, but also his body of work. Literally since I don't think I remember the first game was against Purdue and they had the rotation. Kevon Lee was still here, but I think it was the Ohio game. What might be the second game of his career. Then he started to shake loose, and then Auburn, and then it was just. Then you mentioned the Rose Bowl. I am splitting my vote. I think you could make a case, and I'm talking about what they've done, but also what they're going to do this year. You could probably make a case for like 6 or 7 guys. I am splitting my vote, and it's not running backs or quarterbacks. I'm going to give half. If it was up to me, it would either be Venga, Ioane, or Deny. I think by the end of this year, those 2 monsters are going to be. I think they both of them could be in the first round conversation. I just watching those guys and what they did to people at the line of scrimmage, good people. It was denied late in the year because he had the groin injury, but by the end of the year, there wasn't a. I mean, it was him and Abdul. I don't know that I would take another defensive end over either one of them at the end of the year. And then you just don't get to see him a lot, but he was just killing people inside. I'm a big fan of the line of scrimmage. I would pick those 2 guys, but I can't argue with your pick. And I do think by the end of the year, we could be talking about 5 or 6 guys that would deserve to be the guy, the Penn State guy on the cover. But I like all 3 of our picks.
Bob, I think so. So this is for the deluxe edition, right? Where Nick and James Franklin and all these guys are on it.
Yeah,
I think EA should do a deluxe edition, and it's just offensive linemen.
Yes.
And you've got Venga there.
Yeah.
You've got, I mean, there's a lot of guys across college football on the offensive line who deserve some love. I think EA should do a deluxe edition with just offensive linemen. I would love it.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I'm sure EA is probably will be listening to this podcast later, and I'm sure they're going to get right on that. But I just am really excited to watch this Penn State offensive line. I want them to stay healthy, and I just want to see even their 6th, 7th, and 8th guys, like a guy like Javen Williams, that I think he's real close. Just talking to more than one guy, and they're not BSers. They all mention him being, maybe the best athlete of the bunch. And if you're a big guy that's that athletic and now you have some experience and confidence, I mean, I just think their top 8 offensive line, even without Nelson back, I think it's a pretty phenomenal group, and I look forward to seeing them play in the fall. And I know you're a big fan of the offensive line as well.
I'm hoping that in the EA 26 game, you're able to split Venga out wide and then pull him into motion. They better allow that to happen, because that would be great.
All right, Johnny, this one sailed by. It's our final, you and I, our final Blue White Breakdown podcast of May. Max, Ralph, and you will be back on Thursday. I mean, there's so much recruiting to get to. I'm sure there'll be a heaping helping of that. But good chatting with you. If the Penn State fans are watching this and not listening to it, they could see it. Johnny's got a little windburn and a little sunburn. He had a nice weekend, so let's get some emollient and let's get some love on that, because it's only going to get warmer, Johnny, and I can't have you blistering your summer away.
No, can't have that happen. Had some fun on a boat on Memorial Day. What else is there to do? So other than put on sunscreen when the sun was away, but. I thought I wouldn't get burned, and I did. So we'll work on that. We'll get better. We got the whole summer.